Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Solar-Greco, the UUP Stony Brook chapter president. I'm sitting here with Judy Wishnia, one of our earliest UUP members. Welcome, Judy.
Welcome to my kitchen.
All right. Okay. So when did you begin working at Stony Brook?
Okay, I didn't begin working. We came here in the fall of 1967. My husband was recruited to the chemistry department because that was the time the university was building and science was important. And I came as his wife. I had been a TA at Dartmouth where we were before because they had no grad students. And so I had taken a few grad courses, so they allowed me to be a TA. But I really wanted to go to graduate school. And when I got here, I realized this is 1967. Very few women on the faculty, very few women were graduate students. But the wonderful history department took me in. I was in my mid-30s. I had 3 kids, but they took me in and gave me a TA line. So it was just, so that's the beginning. In 1968, the next year, was all the turmoil at the university. And, of course, we supported everything. And the faculty actually had meetings. And here's a Joel Rosenthal story. He was one of the people who tried to get the department not to take Department of Defense money. Okay, so that's aside from the students and so forth. This was a faculty thing that scientists should not take money from departments that supported war. Okay. And then we were on sabbatical for 6 months, but came back, and I continued to be a graduate student. 1973, when the union was formed, of course, my husband immediately joined. I could not because I was a graduate student. I think the following year, I was working and I was teaching a course. And so that's when I joined the union. In the meantime, a bunch of women at the university, not a bunch, a group of women at the university, including faculty and professionals, would meet for lunch. And we formed a chapter, the first chapter of the National Organization of Women in Suffolk County. And from then on, Suffolk County took it over. But, we did it, okay? And after a while, we began to talk about how we were all underpaid, underappreciated, and so forth. And we began to speak to people. And within a year, we had more than 30 women who were willing to join a class action suit against the Board of Trustees, against SUNY, not,
the university.
Yeah, well, it was the university, okay. Yeah. Because they were the ones who were underpaying us. The usual, underpaid, hired at a lower salary, no promotion, I think maybe it was a handful of women who had tenure. So we had faculty, professionals, you had entire nursing faculty. Because they, with advanced degrees and heavy teaching loads, were paid less than X-ray technicians. So they were really pissed, okay? So they joined the suit. It was called Koza versus Moore because they went by alphabet and Koza was the earliest, okay? And she was a victim not just of salary, she was a very famous sociologist, and so was her husband. They recruited both, but they wouldn't give her a job in sociology because there was anti-nepotism at the time. Husbands and wives couldn't work in the same department. So she went to community medicine or something like that. But eventually she broke it, that no more problems with
spousal hires.
Yeah, okay. So we had the suit, and it went on for years. it wasn't settled. We had a wonderful lawyer, Judy, who did pro bono, okay? But there were many other expenses. We contributed what we could, but they said, you're the person who's in the union. Could you go to the union? So I went to the Delegate Assembly for the first time. There were two caucuses at that point. There was the United Caucus, which was hooked up to Al Shanker and his crew. And there was the Reform Caucus trying to get more union democracy, not to have it come from bottom, not from the top. I went to the United Caucus first, explained the situation. They weren't interested. I then went to the Reform Caucus and they said, of course, and they would make sure I could speak at the DA. So, I wasn't a delegate, but, I got to speak. And of course, by this time, the United people were embarrassed. And so overwhelmingly, we got $20,000, which was an enormous amount of money. And it paid for most of the, other than the lawyer, or, the depositions and that kind of thing. So it was my first introduction to being at a DA and getting something done. I immediately became a delegate, of course, and continued to be active in the union. I don't want to spend too much time on the suit, but I'll tell you, it lasted until 2081, because Reagan had been elected and he appointed a judge, a conservative judge, who said, yes, Stony Brook discriminates against women, they pay lower salaries, they don't promise, but it's not Stony Brook's fault, that's the society we live in. And so we cannot blame, Stony Brook. But several cases were so awful that he awarded some money to Rhoda Sullivan and Ruth Cowan and one or two others. I did not get mine, okay? My story was, I was, one of my oldest kid was going to college and we didn't have the money. So, for his tuition. So I took a job as the assistant in international relation, what do you call it? The department where you send students overseas. International studies. Yeah. And my salary was $9,000. The chair was 20-something thousand, and he was such incompetent. So I did most of the work. I loved it. It was wonderful sending Long Island kids who had never been off Long Island to China, okay? And one of them actually was at Tiananmen Square. We came back and told me. And he went on sabbatical. He was also a drinker. And he never came back after that. The sabbatical was goodbye. But I took over the whole department, still at $9,000.
So the chair. Well,
yeah, I took over. Yeah. I wasn't appointed the chair, but I did all the work. Yeah. I mean, I was running the program. So I complained, and they said, "You're assistant. You're not the chair, so you don't get the chair's salary." So that was my complaint. At the.
So the suit started essentially in what, 72, 73 and ran to 81, 82.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, that was my first thing. And then I became the academic grievance chair. It's very hard to do academic grievances because most of it is they really worry about their salaries. We can do nothing about that. And very few people had arguments with the chair or anything. But we did have I had several cases where I can't talk about it because it was, grievance, although they're probably dead by now. But I had one case which was incredible. It was a sexual harasser. People didn't talk about sexual harassment in those days, but this guy he drew penises on student papers, and he posted stuff on the one female in the department on her door. That was awful.
Oof.
So we called him in and said, we got to deal with this. And it was me and Bonnie Beck, who was the DICET person at the time. And he
The
came
labor
in.
relations specialist.
Yeah, labor. He came in and he put a gun on the table. And we knew he was a little crazy. So while Bonnie was talking to him, I slipped out and went, and I guess it was Bill Wishnia at the time. I said, call security. And the security came, and the guy was wonderful, by the way. I got to know him.
The
Because,
member who put the gun down, or the
and
security
he took
guard?
the guy
Yeah.
to the hospital.
Mhm.
The guy was released after 2 days, and he drove his car into a stanchion of the northern state and killed himself.
Oh my God.
Okay, so
And he was a
anyway.
member.
Yeah, he was a member,
And he
and
had some mental health issues.
yeah, he had mental problems. So anyway, that was just one of my grievance problems.
Wow, I'd say,
Okay,
yeah.
but most of the others we solved by going to the chair or something like that. Nothing really serious.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, tell us about a time that you had a big battle, win or lose, with management,
oh, with, well,
the administration. Yeah.
I didn't have much of a big battle. I had a few who that was a grievance. We had a guy who was a poet, and it was hard for him to get promoted or to get to be a full professor because everybody had an idea. You had to have a scholarly book, okay?
Yeah.
And he was a poet. He had published poetry, and we fought with the president about that. And we got it. I have a good story about
Which president was that? Marburger?
Marburger.
Yeah.
And I got a good story about Marburger. We had a writing program, and it was 4 women for the instructors, and they were quote part-time, but they worked full-time.
Mm-hmm. You still have that.
Yeah, and so I went to Marburger. We were on a first name basis, by the way. He was really very principled. He was probably one of our better presidents. And I said, it's not in the contract, so I can't say so forth. But these women are working full time on part-time salaries. It's not morally right. And we talked about it. And then he said, how much would it cost to make them instructors with a starting salary? And I told him. He said, okay. And the women kissed me when I came back with the news. But he was not pro-union, because when he retired, I sent him a note and said, come on, Jack, join the union. He said he didn't believe in academic unions, but he was honest. Okay. Oh, we're in the middle of recording something. Okay. Yeah. So can you stop it for a minute?
It's
No.
gonna be messy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's my management story. You asked if we ever had coalitions with students or other unions.
Yeah.
I made it my business to go to the K-12 meetings.
Okay.
And there were 2 big ones every year, where hundreds of people would come for lunch, and they always allowed me to be a speaker. And I still remember saying at one of them, how many of you went to CUNY or SUNY? 90%. And I said, you have to support higher ed. It's, people like you, and so forth. And so they were, the local K-12 people were always really good to us. And I kept urging them, go to your local person and get us some money. But I don't know if they ever did, but we did have an issue. The other one was the graduate students were forming a union, and they picketed, and we had UUP send out a message: do not go to class, do not, obey the pickets. Okay, we had a few non-union people, who I won't name, who did go to class, but mainly they were supported by UUP. They wanted to join UUP, so we brought it to the delegate assembly that graduate student union wanted to be part of UUP. And we had the approval of the university centers, but the four-year colleges who had no graduate students whatsoever said they're students. They did not recognize that many of them were teaching and were going to be our colleagues. And so they never joined UUP, and I still regret that. I really think about that from time to time, how we could have had the graduate students as part of UUP.
And they are in PSC CUNY.
Yeah.
And in Rutgers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, would have been thousands of students who would have been our members. And so that's my other thing. Okay. I see you have some questions here for me.
Yeah. So tell me about Charlie Hanson.
Oh, he was. We didn't agree politically. He was more conservative than Michael and I were, but he was such a go-getter for professionals. And he was the professional VP also in Albany.
Yeah.
And he went up there and really gave them hell for the way they were treating, professionals.
They meaning SUNY Central or the state? Yeah.
Yeah. And here as well, but it was mainly SUNY Central. And when he got the fact that they could get permanent appointment, it was tremendous because that helped bond the professionals with the academics. The union had done something important for them, and that was, a really, great issue. And let's see, what else can I say?
Well, yeah. So what were some of the kind of biggest challenges you faced in your decades as a UUP leader, whether it was at the chapter or at the statewide level?
It was Al Shank.
Oh, yeah.
NICE at that time, it's now changed, at that time was not supportive of higher ed. They ignored us completely. In fact, I don't know if Michael told you this, but we talked a little bit about dropping out of NICE because they were not supportive of us. So I became a delegate to the NICE and AFT conventions immediately. And but it was a real problem. And I have two stories about it, but I can tell you at the end.
Go for it. That's fine.
Okay. Well, we were always more progressive than NICE and a lot of the members. UUP always had a basis of Joel and Michael and so forth. And I went to a AFT convention, and it was right after Roe versus Wade, and somebody had raised the issue that we should say human life begins at conception, which would mean, Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
And I went to the convention and I met up with, the reason I loved the AFT conventions at that time, now they're boring. You met up with people from all over the country and it was just great, and so I found about 30 women from all over the country, and we decided we were going to fight this. And the way Shankar ran things was there were over 2,000 people at the meeting, and there were 6 microphones and 4 seats, next to the microphones on each thing. And if he thought something was coming up that he didn't want, 4 goons would get to the mic, and I used the term goon, so, would get to the mic so nobody could speak. So how are we going to handle this? We got there very early, and we were the first people into the room. We took all 4 seats at each microphone, and we sat there. At 11:30, it was about to come up. The issue was about to come up, and Shankar looks out. Don't ask me was he supportive or not? But it was something he didn't support, I guess. And he said, "It's time for lunch, clear the room." And we refused to leave, hoping that it would be publicity that they were dragging us out or something, but we stayed. We took turns peeing and so forth. And then when they came back, it was introduced. And some people spoke, but the one that really got it was a woman. One of our women got up and said, "I'm a very religious Catholic. I do not believe in abortion, but I wouldn't have one, but I wouldn't impose my views on anyone." And that did it.
Nice.
Because that was the basic principles. That's one thing. Second thing was in the early 90s. It was when they were boycotting South Africa. And, the way it worked is you had a committee meeting and then you brought stuff to the thing.
Yeah.
And so Michael and I went to the Committee for Human and Rights. And I got to the microphone and talked about boycotting. And then I said, and we have to join the campaign to get Nelson Mandela out of prison. He was still in prison at the time. And one of the local two people, that's New York, which was at that time completely dominated by Shankar. And what he would do is to each committee, he would send 30 people from local two who never spoke, but they knew how to vote. Okay, so he had sent these people. And so one of the local two people pushed me away from the mic and said, "Go back to Russia." If it wasn't so awful, it would have been funny. And it then went to the main thing. And Michael he was the one who spoke at the main meeting. He got shoved away with the mic so hard that he almost fell on the floor. Somebody caught him. Okay. I don't know if he ever told you that, probably not. And we got it through. We were one of the last unions to support the boycott. That always pissed me off. Okay. Several years later, who's on the stage? Nelson Mandela. Okay. They invited him because. So I went to the guy who had pushed me away, and I said, you were horrified when I said release Nelson Mandela, but he's on the platform now and everybody's kissing his ass. And he said, things change. And I said, well, things change. It wasn't people who made it change. Anyway, so that's my two stories about.
So what was the response?
But the reason I make it is that we at UUP were always pushing for, what should I say, more progressive things. And, the Reform Caucus died, but one of the important things they did, and we were very active in it from UUP, was to have a forum for the candidates who were running. Before that was a list of candidates. You didn't know what the hell they stood for, but we insisted that it was forum, question and answer. And that is a democratic way of running the union. So that was that.
So when Michael got pushed that hard that he almost fell over, what were the folks in the crowd's reaction to that?
They
if it was on stage, they must have seen.
Yeah. And of course, most of them supported, the boycott.
Yeah.
And so, they just didn't want us to deal with it. So, anyway, the other thing is, what you say, did you join with students and other groups? The first anti-war movement, that is the one against Vietnam. We were buses led from Stony Brook, and we were, students, faculty, staff, and so forth. And then, of course, the war in Iraq. We were one of the first unions, the U.S. Union against the war. And that was Bill Shorten, who was, very good. And our local UUP was very strongly, in favor of that local, that is Stony Brook. Okay.
So we have a very diverse union, whether it's academics or professionals, the occupations that of the work that we do. We have non-tenure track faculty, we have tenured and tenure track faculty, we have professionals who are doing more blue collar work, we have professionals who are doing more white collar work, and of course we have folks that are very conservative, very progressive, and everything in between. So in your experience, what was your kind of experience as a leader and just observing all of this as an active member, really working to unify these diverse and at times disparate interests with many different kind of perspectives and needs?
Yeah, well, since I was active with the women, that was easy because the women professionals and the women faculty got along. Okay, but it was hard. But one of the things I admire about you is the fact that we now have so many professionals, who are active in the union, and so I wish we had more academics. I don't know how we can push that, but we'll see. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is we made sure that UUP people were in the Senate, on campus, and I was a state senator for 8 years and pushed issues like diversity and helping adjuncts, and it didn't go over very well. It was the people who spoke at the statewide meetings were always the administrators, and most of the people from other schools were not as gung-ho as we were, but we did raise those issues with, and it was very important on the local level to have a connection between the Senate and the union. So that was,
Well, so you've been one of my great mentors for years now, and I remember when we first met years ago, you told me as I was getting more and more involved that it was always critical for UUP and the Senate to work together as they could, to respect their respective lanes, but to generally be moving in the same direction and be on the same page, and that we would have our greatest success as agents of change on this campus if we were moving in lockstep. So tell us more about that, and maybe some success stories of when the Senate and UUP worked together at the Stony Brook level, or at the statewide level as well.
Yeah, well, most of it was support for tenure and making sure that people were able to get tenure, deserved tenure. And I still remember that we had, too much detail, but so we did that, and the diversity question. We always, pushed diversity, and so that was, we worked with them on those issues, and we supported them when they had, problems. And the other thing we connected with, and one of the things I told you should do was Long Island labor. We went all the time. And it was great because we met people from other unions, and they recognized that an academic union is a union. And that was so important. And that's still, some of them, we had such good times together. They were drinkers. Now, so anyway.
So what about some cases of academic freedom? Did you ever work on any of those together with the Senate?
Yeah, but I can't remember.
Okay.
I can't remember. You asked me to say something about Joel Rosenthal, and I'll tell you, I don't know if he told you, but in 1974 or 5, when there was the big economic crisis, and Stony Brook cut its education department. I still think that was a gift to private colleges on Long Island, because there was no reason to cut that department. Joel went around to every department in the university to find a space for tenured and even non-tenured, but mainly the tenured. And he found jobs for most of the tenured people,
Wow.
except for a few. And that's when he started a new department, interdisciplinary social science, which included Chinese because she didn't get to, okay, and women's studies. And that's how I got involved with women's studies. It also came out of the group of women that met at lunch all the time that it was nice to have a course in women's studies. And so I taught the first course, and it was difficult because there were like 3 books out at the time. And one of them was Simone de Beauvoir, which none of them really recognized, and so forth. And what I did was I went around to everybody I knew teaching a course that could possibly be cross-listed. And I got sociology and economics and so forth, and I taught the history. And then I took careful notes, and the following year I was able to teach the course without, but we did do a lot of cross-listing. And and I taught the women's history course, both European and American. American was popular. It was so popular that we were bursting out of the rooms. That is, it was over 100 students would come, and it was about 70% female, but there were men who came. And I still remember one pre-med coming up and saying he enjoyed the course, and it would help him understand, because we did a whole section on how women were treated medically, and he appreciated that. So it was, good.
So did that education department that was retrenched, those spin-off departments that Joel helped found, they, correct me if I'm wrong, eventually became the various languages departments, is that correct? Like Hispanic languages and European languages? No? Because some of those departments, I think specifically, are still doing some teacher education training, right? So
yeah,
they're connected in some way?
I don't think they were connected at that point. So, but Joel has always been pushing for, what should we say, a better role for faculty.
Yeah.
And professionals. He's been fantastic as he,
Sure.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned Michael a few times. Tell us who Michael Zweig is, and
Michael Zweig.
Tell us a little about your experience.
Michael Zweig, I don't know if he told you, but aside from being one of the progressive voices in our union, constantly fighting for everything that we wanted, he also went to Iraq, and connected with the labor leaders there and brought them back to Stony Brook.
Oh, wow.
Did he tell you that?
No.
No. Okay. He brought labor leaders from Iraq and Iran to Stony Brook, and we met with them, and so forth. And of course, he's been active all over the world. And he always, here he is. He's probably almost as old as I am, and he's still incredibly active. So in the union and in other organizations that are close. I do want to tell you about Bill Godfrey's big thing. He started something called Stony Brook Day. The union organized a bus. The first bus, I think, had maybe 25, 30 people on it. And we went to the legislature in Albany to talk about how wonderful Stony Brook was and how we needed more money. And it was very successful. So the next year, it wasn't Marburg, it was probably Charlotte at that time. They decided, what a great idea. And they did dozens of buses. We had hundreds of students, faculty, nurses. And it was just wonderful. We did it for 2 or 3 years. I don't know why it stopped, because it went over very well with the legislators because we're so happy to meet students.
Yeah.
We had a lot of students who came and, oh, yeah, it was wonderful. So I don't know why they quit it, but that was, and Bill Godfrey also ran programs for disadvantaged students. So he was, aside from, his act in the union and so forth. Otherwise,
Yeah, so I know there was an early fight to bring the childcare center
yes,
to the university.
I have a funny story. Okay, we had demonstrations for a childcare center, and I said, there are all these sit-ins. Why don't we have a P-in? Why don't we take all these kids and put them in the president's office without diapers? And nobody agreed, but I thought it was a great idea. We eventually got the childcare centers, and which is, I find it's good for students, but it's expensive. All childcare. Newsday has been running a whole series on costs, and one of them was childcare.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about Karen and Andrew. If Andrew wasn't working at home, but they both take care of the baby.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. Congratulations, you're recently a great grandmother.
Yeah, my third great grandchild.
Yes, wow.
And I talked to him. If there's anything else.
Well, and you recently, what was it, a couple months ago, you celebrated a birthday, right?
My birthday.
Yeah, back in I think April, right?
Yeah, I'm 92.
92. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm happy. I'm very weak physically. I do have a hard time walking. But thank God, one of the good things to come out of the pandemic was Zoom. So I can go to meetings.
And not have to walk around on campus in the heat.
Yeah, I can't walk on campus, but I could until about a year ago. And I had pictures of us at demonstrations. And anyway.
Yeah. So one of the early big events on campus, and this was before UUP, was one of those great drug busts in the 60s. So can you tell us a little about that?
Well, it was sad for two reasons. One, because they chose Stony Brook, and as they said, they could have gone to any high school and gotten the same results. It wasn't hard drugs; it was marijuana. And now everybody wants to accept me. And what was bad about it was that it hindered community university relations. You go out, in the community, and said, "Oh, it's a bunch of druggies at the university." They didn't talk about the academic standards or the courses we taught, but but anyway, what can I say about it? It was awful. Okay. And Michael can tell you more because he was.
And he did when we spoke to him. So I know that he got caught up in it, and he ended up going to jail because he didn't want to, because they were pressuring him to rat out on his students and all these sorts of things, and he didn't want to. He put his students first. So what about were there any other faculty that you're aware of or staff that were caught up in this in a similar sense of being torn between turning against their students and essentially aiding in them potentially going to jail?
No, I mean, we supported them, but there was nothing special.
Yeah.
Michael would know more about it than I do.
Yeah. But it was very tumultuous on campus, right? I know that.
Oh, absolutely.
There was like a midnight raid, right? And dozens of students.
And I still remember when there were demonstrations in late 60s. I'm trying to remember. No, it was 70s. There were demonstrations, student demonstrations. And I still remember I was teaching a course and I was looking out the window and I said, "Oh, my son is getting arrested." Steve and Steve Granitas were arrested for just demonstrating. We had an awful acting president at that time. so I went to bail them out the next day, and they were both filthy and bearded, and I kept saying, gee, maybe I won't bail them out. But it was, it was it was a student demonstration. I forget the cause, but it may have been the war, because, well, I'm trying to think. Yeah, okay.
So when did you retire from state service, and what was your title upon retirement?
I never got promoted to full professor, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah,
okay.
Why?
I had a book out, which was well received, and then I had material for a second book, which would have made, I was an associate professor. The lowest paid associate professor at the university. I looked it up.
I wonder why.
Yeah. And so I was ready to write another book. And then Bill Scheuerman called and said, how would you like to be on the negotiating team? And I said, that's, you stop doing anything except that. And I said, well, if I write a book, several hundred people will read it. If we have a good contract, 30,000 people will benefit. The hell with the book and the hell with the promotion. So I went, and it was a very hard contract because they wanted to contract out not just professional services like the mail, but courses. Okay. Why have a German department if you can send your students to Hofstra to take German? Okay. So we fought that, won eventually, but it took 2 years. And I went up every bloody weekend. And that's how I know Michael Silverberg so well. He was on the team, and he lived around the corner, and we drove up together. And he was a great president at the Health Science Center.
Stony Brook Health Science Center.
Stony Brook Health Science Center. And he's coming here for dinner tomorrow night. I haven't seen him in years.
Great.
So I retired in 2000 when they offered a sabbatical with your retirement, and so forth. I was 69, and my classes were getting so big. I felt I wasn't teaching anymore. I was performing
for customers.
Yeah. And but I continued to be active because then I became chair of the retirees in the union. And my retirement is infinitesimal. Okay, but thank God I have a husband who has TIA credit. Okay, I was put into the teachers' retirement fund by mistake, and I couldn't get out. So I was never in TIA, but they made a mistake in the office, and so my retirement is, I'll tell you what it is. It's $2,400 a month. I couldn't keep this house if we didn't have our salary.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't care. Money is not the crucial thing. We have retirement, and we have good health care thanks to the union. You know that when you retire, you not only have Medicare when you're 65, but we have the Empire plan. And do not go for the private plan that they pushed in New York City. We're fine with Empire.
Yeah.
Arnold had a horrible cancer surgery of the whole face, and he needed 4 physicians, one for the eye, one for the mouth, one for the ear, so because the cancer was inside. And it would have cost hundreds of thousands. We did pay a couple of thousand for, not everything is, but it's amazing. We would have been completely broke.
Yeah.
So one wonderful thing that the union has done for all of us, good medical care.
Yeah.
Except for dental.
So what gives you hope for the future of the labor movement and NICET and UUP and
Okay.
all of that?
For the labor movement in general, I'm upset with, you know, AFL-CIO. We've got all these little groups forming unions, and they're not going in there and organizing them. The people are doing it by themselves. And so I think there's a lot of grassroots stuff, from unions, but also the polls show that a big majority of Americans support unions. And, they know how good unions are. And so that gives me some hope for the future. In terms of UUP, can I compliment you? I think UUP is doing fantastic. We never had so many people involved as we do now.
Thank you.
And so that is great. And in terms of NICET has changed. They are now much more supportive of higher ed. AFT were not that involved, but so forth. So, I feel, and, the things are good. And I'm very proud of Stony Brook University, one of the best universities in the country that educates people who don't have money. I think we may be the top, we're certainly the tops in New York State, and we may be one of the tops in the country that educates students.
Yeah.
Look, the Speaker of the Assembly, Hasty, is a Stony Brook grad. And I just found out that Jack Smith, guy who's prosecuting Trump, went to Oneonta.
There you go. Yeah.
So there you go. And, so I'm I have hopes that people will wake up and say, give more money to it shouldn't be that the tuition is so high for students and stuff. And so but I'm an optimist. I'm a pessimist about what the hell is happening to our country. Okay. Can I say this on the record? I want Trump to fall down the stairs. Okay. He went down in that escalator. The escalator should stop working.
Oh goodness. Any last words or last thoughts you wish to share with our members?
Anything I made some notes, and I don't think I have anything else.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing your pearls of wisdom with our membership. And if you think of anything else, we could schedule a part 2.
Yeah, I will. I'll call you. Okay.
There you go. Okay. Thank you for your time.
And I thank you for doing this. It's wonderful to have this. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.